Welcome to this webinar, Stunting and Human Capital Among Indigenous Community, a case study of Amazonian. We would you like to thank everyone here for taking time to attend our remarkable webinar. To give you audience a sense about what is Public Health Literature Club, I would let me give you a brief story and the purpose of this community. So Public Health Literature Club is a voluntary-based community with found in 2020 by our young leading Miss Nilna, based on the rise people awareness in the importance of academic and non-academic publication with the regard best health literacy in Indonesia. This webinar is in collaboration with Universitas Hasanuddin, Kesmas ID, dan Lembaga Kajian dan Konsultasi Pembangunan Kesehatan LK2PK. LK2PK will organize Indonesian Stunting Forum in 24 and 26 January 2022 in the National Library of Indonesia with hybrid methods. Uh, we are glad the announcement that our webinar provides a certificate and free merchandise from 2 active participants. So please enjoy and feel free to raise questions and type your comment in this chat box. Before we are start our main session, I would like to invite Dr. Dihram Tenrisau, our excellent moderator. Dr. Dihram is a data consultant and data scientific in PASCAS and Digital Transformation Office, Ministry of Health Indonesia. Dr. Dihram, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presenter, Ms. Puji, for the chance. Okay, my name is Dihram Tendisai, member of the Public Health Literature Club, PHLC. Firstly, I would like to greet the audience, the honorable speaker, Eduardo Unduraga, PhD. Eduardo Unduraga, PhD, is an associate professor at School of Government Pontificia, Universidad Católica de Chile. Originally trained as a civil engineering and later as a social scientist, Eduardo's research draws from various tools to understand the local, national, and global level factors that affect population health and well-being, and assess the impact of programs and intervention to improve policy. Previously, he worked at the Modeling and Health Economics units of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, CDC, doing research in infection disease control and prevention, and as a senior research associate at the Snyder Institute for Health Policy, Brandeis University. Today we'll hear the presentation about his research about stunting that titled Child Stunting is Associated with Weaker Human Capital Among Native Amazonians. Also, I would like to greet the special responders of the event. The first is Prof. Dr. M. Rizal M. Damani, M.Rep. SC, PhD as the Deputy for Planning, Research, and Development of National Population and Family Planning Board KBN. Dr. Hidayanti. Okay. Dr. Healthy Hidayanti as the Head of Nutrition Science Department, Public Health Faculty, Universitas Hasanuddin. Dr. Grace Wange, PhD, as the Manager of Knowledge Management and Policy Support Unit, Samuel Rekpon, and also BKKBN staff and Dean, and also the representative of Dean of Hasanuddin University, Prof. Sukri Paluturi. And also I want to say thank you to all of the audience that spared their time to attend this international webinar. Thank you for attending this event. This event will be the part of the pre-event of LK2PK PHLC event in January 2020, Indonesia Stunting Forum. Without any further ado, Prof. Eduardo, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Can you see the screen and hear me properly?
Yes. Yes. clear.
Great. So I first wanted to thank you for the kind invitation to present some of our work in this webinar. I want to thank especially Diram who contacted me, and I'm going to talk about stunting and human capital among forager farmers in the Bolivian Amazon. So Diram mentioned my research is really on the interaction between the social sciences and human health. So part of it, part of my research agenda has to do with the effects of social cultural factors on health. Some of it has to do with this, and the last part is bridging the gap between academia and policy. I think that according to what Diram told me, part of the interest of this seminar is precisely to connect research to policy and policy implications. So I'm going to try to do that a little bit. So just to give some context, this research is part of a effort led by Ricardo Godoy, the professor here in the picture from Brandeis University. It's based on data from a panel study. So panel data is a type of longitudinal data where observations are for the same subjects are repeated over time. So for the same participants and their households. These kind of studies are not very common in anthropology and among indigenous peoples, but they have been effectively used for other population health research to study growth and maturation and the long-term consequences in populations around the world. The advantage of the longitudinal panels data is that they allow researchers to understand life cycle dynamics, and specifically this study follows a group of forager farmers in the Amazon, in the Bolivian Amazon, as they integrate into the national, international, and formal market economies. The panel study includes 13 villages and about 300 households, 330 households, and about 2,000 people followed every year. So the objective of the panel study is to measure changes in the quality of life, isolated communities as they integrate to the market, and this includes questions related to economic development, social aspects of social changes in terms of sharing, reciprocity norms, inequalities, human capital, such as cognitive skills, math, for example, health, anthropometrics, presence of
Subhanallah, ikut baru nggak apa.
presence of parasites, and then some other type of questions of ethnobotanical knowledge. So this research started in the 90s with the ethnographic work from Ricardo Godoy, the person I showed you in the previous picture. And the objective is to test the universality of findings from the industrial world in isolated settings. So to give some context about the people, the Chimane are a population of about 15,000 people in approximately 120 villages, with a vast variation in market exposure. I'm going to show you to convey what I mean. It's a relatively egalitarian society, tightly knit, with relatively lax property rights, and they mostly, their economy is based on subsistence activities, mostly slash and burn agriculture, and fishing and hunting. And then in recent years, and this is part of the reasons why I think this is interesting, is that in recent years the government has expanded its reach towards this region, and they have implemented several interventions related to education and conditional cash transfers related to child health and education. And also there's a lot of infrastructure going on. So highways and water and sanitation. This is Bolivia, and then the picture here is the square area, and our study setting is here. So this is in the Bolivian Amazon. And then we have the panel study. The villages participating in the panel study are these are roads. And then all the other villages are shown. So as I mentioned, there's a gradient of integration to the market. So this is how San Borja looks like. This is the biggest area. So San Borja is a town of people, and so I mean, it has like urban infrastructure. As we're moving towards some other villages, the landscape turns a little bit more rural. So roads are mud roads, and sometimes of the year you cannot access those. And then as you move further in, roads start to get more complicated. Very difficult to access. You have to in a vehicle or a motorcycle. Then most of these villages are in areas where they used to be. They're isolated. Then there's the farther away villages where you have to reach. I mean, they're harder to reach, and you have to get there by a boat. Give some stunting and nutrition. So stunting or linear growth retardation documented in about half of the rural indigenous population is stunting is usually a signal. It's a proxy for adverse conditions during growth, and stunting has been associated with developmentally induced modifications to body composition, including body fat, muscularity, and so to understand this stunting, usually stunting is associated with a long-term consequence, an increased risk of developing metabolic diseases and cardiovascular diseases, but also with cognitive development. So to give a little bit of the malnutrition is associated with cognitive, physical, and metabolic impairments that can lead to later problems, and also to limitations in school attainment and reduced activity, among others. There are several factors that contribute to malnutrition. Some of it is related to deprivations from poverty, inadequate nutrients, for example, poor water and sanitation, a high disease burden, and partially is determined also by genetic potential. So, but stunting is a specific set of undernutrition. It's a way of measuring undernutrition that is characterized by insufficient height. And this is still, as we can see here in the map in the top, this is still a major problem globally. So a large percentage of children are stunted. Children are under 5. This is the estimate for year 2017. This is the Bolivian Amazon, where the study was conducted. And then the map below shows the endless decrease in stunting that would be needed to meet the WHO goals for global nutrition targets in 2025. In the Amazon, most of the infectious diseases, such as respiratory infection, parasitic infections, are an important source of energetic stress in many populations. Studies are specifically on the population that parasitic infections rarely cause death, but they can potentially impact nutrition, growth, and cognitive development. There's a high prevalence of infection. About 77% of children were positive for some form of helminth or protozoan infection, shown in the upper table. The other table is another survey in 2011. And they also find that about 70% of the sample were positive for hookworm. So infectious diseases are a major problem in this. Now to our study. So, I mentioned child stunting is a chronic restriction of a child's potential growth. We define stunting as the proportion of children with a height that is more than 2 standards deviation below the World Health Organization median standards for a healthy population. And then some researchers have defined a window of intervention among children younger than 2 years of age to redress stunting, but recent longitudinal evidence suggests that this stunting is reversible after the age of 2. So this is really what's driving our research question. So first, is child stunting associated with weaker human capital? This has been found in a lot of literature, but does it stand for isolated communities? And then the other question is whether this association can be regressed after the 2 years of age. So what's new about this study? First, we're examining the association between child stunting and human capital in a unique setting in the Bolivian Amazon. So most people have access to adequate nutrition, but then, as I mentioned, there's a high disease burden. This is a relatively egalitarian society, so it lacks confounders found in literature, such as ethnic and racial heterogeneity, differential access to healthcare, segregation, differential exposure to pollution, or inequalities in access to resources. So this is a relatively egalitarian society. So we mostly don't have to worry about those confounders, or at least a little bit less. And then we extend the existing literature by examining the association with locally relevant cultural knowledge, and specifically, we examine the child knowledge of local plants. And then we use also other standard measures of human capital. And the third thing that is new about this studies that we use longitudinal data, so we can assess changes over time. And this is important because this society is changing very quickly as it integrates to formal markets. For the previous work, Some of the previous work suggests that a large share of children in the Amazon are stunted.
Sorry.
Yeah, but these rates are declining. So in year 2000, a study suggested that about half of boys and girls in the sample in villages were stunted, and in 2010 this had decreased about to about 1/3. And let me show you. But this is a growth rates. I mean, children are still stunted, and it's pretty persistent. So this shows on the left, it shows a in years, and then the dots show the distribution. So let's look at the page, the black dots here in 2002. WHO standards, the median is here. So we can see that most children are below the median. And then in 2003, children should be here, but they're still here, 2004, 2005. So always below WHO standards. And the same is true for boys. And the same is true for all cohorts. And then is the changes are there's some change, but it's relatively persistent. So this shows on the x-axis the status in 2002, and then the so children were normal, and most of them were still normal height. A few of them were marginally stunted, and the ones who were stunted in 2002 were still stunted, mostly stunted in 2010, and those who were marginally stunted in 2002 were still marginally stunted in 2010, with a few exceptions. So this is basically showing that stunting is pretty persistent. So the objectives of this research is focus on children in primary school to attend two sets of assessments. We use cross-sectional data to examine the association between the children's stunted, moderately stunted, and non-stunted. And we use the complete grades of schooling, test-based academic skills, so math, reading and writing, and local plant knowledge. And then we use longitudinal data to estimate the association between changes in category and a human capital. First cross-section in 2008, where we used 50 villages, and then for the longitudinal panel, we used 13. So some of the definitions, we define stunting as 2 standard deviations below the median age, sex standardized C-scores for well-nourished international population, based on Brazil, Ghana, India, Norway, and Oman. Okay. And then we measure human capital as math skills. We ask children to solve arithmetic operations that require them to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and then we create a score. We did a simple reading test. We asked children to read sentences that were appropriate to their age. And then a simple writing test, which basically was asked them to write their name. And then we had a local plant knowledge. So we developed a structured questionnaire for 6 plants. And this was basically based on whether children could identify the names of the plants, what were the most common uses and animals associated to those plants. And this is to show we have used this before in other studies. So a lot of children scored 0 in their math test, and then a all operations. And then there's a correlation with the.
I'm sorry, Prof. Eduardo. I don't think we can hear your voice very clear. I mean, sometimes your voice breaking. Yeah,
Oh, my voice is breaking. Sorry.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
That's better.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Closer with the microphone is better.
Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
So for the analysis, we use ordinary least squares, regressions with household fixed effects and robust standard errors. So this is for the cross section, and this is for the longitudinal data. And the main results are that we found ubiquitous association between child stunting and child human capital. With what has been found in other studies. But we extended the findings to remote society. The magnitude was also relevant. Stunted children had a 0.4 fewer completed grades of schooling than their non-stunted age sex peers. Because schooling is so low, I mean, the average number of completed grades in the cohort was 1.7. So a 0.4 deficit is about 24% of fewer completed grades. And then using the longitudinal data, we found consistently that a persistent stunting was associated with fewer completed grades of schooling also. But we did not find a consistent association with weak skills. We found that faltering was associated with low probability of math skills or writing skills. And also we find that recovery from early stunting leads to estimates that are no different from those for children who are never stunned. And then we found association between moderate stunting and local plant knowledge. But this finding was not robust. I mean, some of the limitations, this study of course has a lot of limitations. One of the main limitations is that we might have some measurement error. The test, doing standardized tests in this population is very challenging, so we had to simplify some of the tests. Then another limitation is a relatively small sample size. So some of the lack of findings may partly due to a lack of statistical power. And then the bottom line is that we found consistent with the other literature that a child stunting So let me point out to other important aspects of these studies. The first is so related to government interventions. There have been an increase in conditional cash transfers in the region to address issues in schooling or health. And so we did a recent study where we gave food transfers to improve child nutritional status to women in the male, and this was a randomized trial, and we found no differences in
food resource in the hand of female adult members.
Exactly. We found no differences when you gave resources to females compared to men, and this is important because a lot of studies in the Americas have found a substantial differences, but this is highlighting that specific populations have different needs, and so policy have to be adapted to specifically to their specific culture, right? So the second finding is that some of the differences in height may be more structural, and this shows the relationship between height for age birthday, and you can see very big differences in height by the where a child was. Of course, has relationship with abilities. So the basic finding is that children born in the rainy season were shorter, while children born at the end of the dry season and the start of the rainy season were taller compared to their peers. And this correlation was stronger for boys and for girls. So there are some structural factors that are also affecting in stunting that don't have to do with the specifics of a household, but rather to variables that are out of the control of the people. And then another study related to policy. This was a cash transfers for primary education, and we compared different indigenous groups. Found that so the objective was to estimate predictors of participation in this program, in cash transfer programs, to increase child enrollment in school, and of course understanding what are the factors that affect participation in these programs is important because they can help the program broaden its reach. And we found that children among the most marginalized and least acculturated group, which is the Chimane, were the less likely to participate in these programs. So the most marginalized group are the ones that are more difficult to reach with this kind of programs to improve nutrition. So just to give a few final thoughts, this is the cover of Nature magazine, and to underscore some of the difficulties. We have to put together people from different backgrounds. We're a diverse group of anthropologists and nutritionists and economists, and answer a policy question. Thank you very much for your attention, and happy to take.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Eduardo, Prof. Eduardo, and I think it's really important for Indonesia. There are a lot of indigenous community, and especially the rural community, similar like Chimane community, and I think this research will be really impactful if it's implemented in Indonesia. Okay, thank you for your presentation, and also I would greet Dr. Ida Leida Maria as the Director of Education, Universitas Hasanuddin. Okay, I believe that the stunting issue is related to the policy making, especially in Indonesia. In Indonesia, the stunting issue is led by BKKBN. BKKBN is National Health Planning, and also there with us Prof. Rizal. Prof. Rizal is also a lecturer and researcher in IPB. There are several researches of Prof. Rizal based on nutrition and diet among the indigenous community in Indonesia, especially in Bataknis and West Kalimantan, Indonesia. I think it's time to hear the response from Prof. Rizal. Prof. Rizal, time is yours.
Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I would prefer to give a comment later. The second one after the first commentator. Right? I'm still preparing the devices now at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Rizal. And
Kak Tasha, you're on mute. You still on mute.
hello. Oh, sorry. Hello. Okay, we move to the second responder. Okay. She is the researcher and also the head of department Nutrition Science Department, Public Health Faculty, Universitas Hasanuddin, and also and in fact that Universitas Hasanuddin has a lot of program that related to the stunting issue. One of the most foremost is the vocational class for the asthma youth. The asthma is an indigenous community in the Eastern Indonesia, and also with us there is Dr. Halti as the head of Nutrition Science Department, Public Health Faculty, Universitas Hasanuddin, and also has a long time experience in this issue. One of foremost of her research is a social cognitive theory-based program for eating patterns and sedentary activity among overweight adolescents in Makassar, South Sulawesi, a cluster randomized control trial, which is published in 2016. Okay, Dr. Halti, time is yours.
Very much, Mr. Moderator. Am I audible?
It's clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank to the committee for giving me this opportunity to be involved in this interesting and useful event. Good morning, Mr. Eduardo.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you? Okay.
Good, thank you.
Okay, it's my pleasure to be one of responder of this event. Good evening also, Prof. Rizal, and also Dr. Grace, and all of the audience. Congratulations, Prof. Eduardo, for your interesting presentation, and also thank you for sharing your very interesting study related to the indigenous community. Based on your presentation, it's I am really interesting about this stunting and also human capital among indigenous community. Based on your presentation, I can see that you provide good, strong justification that it is important for prevention and also control stunting in the children, yeah, especially to prevent negative impact in capital. So, brief explanation that it will be impact for the future life, both in the children and also to the sorry. Yeah. Related to study stunting and human capital among indigenous community, especially from our department, it's not well explored. Yeah, so from this opportunity, maybe I would like to ask a little bit of question related to your interesting presentation. Can you give or share your experience during conduct the study in the Simane, yeah, in the Simane community? What is actually the strong what is the strong limitation, or also from your
Dr. Halti, your mic, please. Please unmute. Dr. Halti.
Okay, is it clear?
Clear.
Okay, so Prof. Eduardo, could you please share what is the strength and also the limitation during the conduct this study? Thank you, Prof.
Okay, Prof Eduardo.
Sure. So thank you for your thank you for your interesting questions. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I think one of the most difficult aspects of field work in this area is that a lot of these communities are very difficult to access during the rainy season because there's no roads, or roads are in very poor condition. So most of the work has to be done during the dry season. And even in the dry season, I mean, there's sometimes rains, and so the roads are inaccessible. And so that's one difficult aspect, I think. Another difficult aspect is that a lot of the standardized questionnaires that you can use, for example, to study academic achievement or as proxies for human capital, do not work very well in these communities. And a lot of the children have no schooling, and some children have only a few years of schooling or some limited schooling. So you have to adapt some of the standardized scores to something that is meaningful to the communities, and that what you're asking is something that so the response that you get is what you actually want them to respond, and not something different. So you have to do a lot of piloting first, and to make sure that the words are translated appropriately, and then that you're asking the proper questions. And also you don't want to put too much burden on the question. I mean, it's very difficult to have a kid, and especially kids that don't go to school often, sitting with you for 40 minutes or so. You have to make these tests short and brief and meaningful. So those are the main limitations of fieldwork, I think. And then some of the strengths of this work relate to something I also mentioned tangentially in the beginning of the presentation, and it's related to the fact that, as you know, most research on these topics comes from high-income countries, and mostly in the Western world. So basically, the United States and Europe, and perhaps Australia and New Zealand. But so a lot of the findings, especially in education or behavior, do not necessarily represent the global population. And so I think this is one of the strengths. This is a group that is very underrepresented in research, and so it allows to extrapolate, to extend some of the findings in the literature to different populations. And I think that it's important for policy, and it's also important to advance knowledge.
Thank you, Prof. Eduardo. Might I raise another question? This is very interesting for me from your study. Your study related, you see the correlation between child stunting and human capital through the math, reading, and also you see how they writing right to measure the human capacity. Is in your study, do you see, or do you control about the nutritional? I mean that about the food and also the nutrition to this community or these children, or from your previous study or something like that? Do you have any consideration about that in your study?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So the group that I'm part of has examined nutrition among the Chimane, and other groups have as well. And most people have enough calories, for example, to live a healthy life and to develop. And then there's oftentimes, I mean, you now see in low-income countries, for example, in South America, where I'm from, or where we're doing this work, obesity rates have increased substantially. And that has to do with access to calories. I mean, people have access to processed food and a lot of food, but they can still be malnourished, right? Because they don't have a micronutrient. And what we found, what other studies have found, and our group has found in the Amazon, is that children have access to a wide range of different foods. So that shouldn't be a problem. But some of the work, especially some of the work that I showed in the beginning by Susan Tanner and her group, has shown that probably one of the main problems is related to the high prevalence of infection, and mostly helminth and hookworm. And so probably parasites are a big problem, a big part of the malnutrition problem. But in this specific study, we did not measure. I mean, we just used stunting as a proxy for malnutrition, but we did not measure specific nutritional behaviors, for example, if that was the question. And then, so the paths through which stunting or malnutrition affects academic skills or cognitive skills in early life are also not a very clear in literature. I mean, there's some ideas, you know, through energy levels or illnesses or brain development, for example, or brain function. Those are the possible paths. But I think there's still a gap in the literature to understand which are the specific mechanisms that explain this association between stunting and cognitive, lower cognitive and academic skills.
Thank you very much. So it can be opportunity to do the next research like that, yeah, of Eduardo. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you, Prof. Eduardo, for your great insight about your study, and this can be very impactful for us to do maybe the similar study in the Indigenous community in our place. Thank you, Dr. Eduardo. Thank you, moderator. Thanks for me. Enough.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Holti. And then we move to the first report responder that has been delayed, Prof. Rizal.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Prof.
Thank you.
Rizal.
Yes. Can you hear? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you
it's clear.
hear me? Hello.
Yes, it's clear.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So good morning. Yeah. Good morning, Professor Eduardo. My name is Rizal Damanik. So I'm just back from the office now. So I'm on the way home. Please, I'd like to just not using my video to make my voice clear. Stop the video. Can you hear me, Professor Eduardo?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you for a stimulating presentation. So, the title of your research is about child stunting is associated with weaker human capital among native Amazonians. Several studies actually state that the stunting in children over 2 years of age is irreversible. And however, recent longitudinal studies have shown that stunting in children over 2 years of age is irreversible. This is what I read from your introduction, actually. I tried to resume some points, which is interesting. So the contribution of the study in the association between child stunting and weaker human capital among native Amazons is conducted in a unique setting, right? It's a remote area, economically independent, a rural community, native Amazonians, and horticulturalists, foragers in Bolivia, and Simani. And the characteristic of the Simani community are racially and ethically homogeneous, with an immigrant population of around 5%. And there are limitations in assessing modern health facilities, while other similar studies held in many unobserved, omitted socioeconomic co-founders, such as ethnic and racial heterogeneity, access to health facilities, residential segregations, or different exposure to pollution. So the setting enables researchers to link child stunting with human capital by examining the linkage between child stunting and local plant knowledge. And knowledge of local plant can increase the use of local natural resources, thereby multiplying benefits such as implementing quality and quantity of diet using medicinal plants, or increasing agricultural productivity. Parents who have an understanding of local plants show a positive relationship to maternal and child health and can complete with factors such as formal educational attainment and educational skills in practical terms. The study, in your study, focus on children in primary school ages 6 to 16 years to estimate the two sets of associations. First, using cross-sectional data from 2008, estimating contemporaneous relationship between children's height categories: stunted, moderately stunted, and non-stunted, and human capital measure as school graduation rate, test-based academic skills. In this case, is mathematics, reading, writing, and local plant knowledge. Moreover, the study is conducted by utilizing a 9-year longitudinal data set from 2002 to 2010 of all children in 13 villages along the Manic River, as well as estimating the relationship between changes in categorical of pay from the first year to the last year in which the children is measured. And second is school and academic schools during last year of measurement. I think this scoring method is common to be conducted in the developing countries. About the method, the data used are from two studies, as mentioned in your presentation, an annual longitudinal studies of data sets of all see money living in 13 villages during 2002 to 2010, right? And during 2008 annual survey of 850 children, it's 6 to 16 years. The study also using WHO standards, and human capital outcomes is completed grades of schooling, academic skills, and local plan knowledge. The result of your study is on longitudinal study. Actually, statistically, the cross-sectional data, non-stunted children had more years of school completion and more math skills than stunted peers, but they did not have better reading or writing skills, and they did not know more about local plants than other children. This is an interesting one. And the results on the longitudinal study compared to a child who was not stunted in the first and the last year of the measurement, a child who was not stunted but become stunted or flattered had an 18% lower probability of knowing any mathematics and a 15% lower probability of knowing how to write for a threshold of -2. Likewise, a child who was filtered based on the threshold of -2 had 21% lower probability of knowing any mathematics or know how to write than a was not stunted during the first and last year of measurement. In your conclusion, the association of stunting and child human capital is found in remote area societies without well-established educational and health system. And stunting was associated with 0.4 fewer completed schooling, but it was not consistently associated with weaker academic skill. So based on these and the result of just comment on this, that that this study is utilize a big sample size. It is like can mean measurement error, bias in data. My second comment, the research incorporated cross-sectional and longitudinal data is serving a comprehensive study and complementing each other. It's not easy, but it's complementing. The third, there is a probability that the study was not sensitive enough to capture the slightest difference in academic skills between children who recover from stunting and children who were never stunted. And the next comment is there is a chance that local plant knowledge is dependent on parents' transmission to their children. It could relate to parenting, frequent transferable knowledge of local plants and other factors rather than stunting variables. And my fifth comment is a variable of child human capital in this study, namely completed schooling and academic skills, were not just influenced by stunting incidents, but also involve parental investment, referred to as any expenditure like time, energy, resources, etc., that the parent in cures to benefit an offspring investment. And regarding the completed grades of schooling, the authors of the study did not inform average completed schooling in Amazonian society. And the other comment is the percentage of children who are filtered, recovered, and never stunted was not elaborated enough. So the research did not contribute to the likelihood of childhood stunting affected when they enter school age. So, Professor Eduardo, that's my comments, and I also have at least about 4 questions here. And the first one is, how do the limitation of variables as human capital outcomes selected completed grades of schooling, academic schools, and local plan knowledge? That's my first question. And then the second one is, when it comes to human capital outcome, the latest research suggests that human capital is not only related to cognitive skills, but also non-cognitive, such as intra and interpersonal skills. Some aspects of motivations and behavior, as well as the physical, emotional, and mental health of individuals, are also regarded as human capital in this broader definition. Perhaps the preferred title of the study should be Stunting Associated with Cognitive Skills. That's come in my mind. And the third, how does the study impact directly to the local society? The main livelihood of the Tsimane is a horticulturalist, forager society. And when we talk about human capital, it is related to higher earning and economic growth. What is the suggestion for further study of this research? And the fourth, what kind of best practices can be adopted in the rural areas in Indonesia to increase the rate of recovered child stunting and suppress faltering in children, based on your research experience? That's all, Professor Eduardo. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, moderator.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I think that's a lot of questions, and I think that make this discussion more interesting. In almost 9 p.m. 9 p.m. in Makassar, Indonesia. So, Prof. Eduardo, do you want to reply the comment and the questions, please?
Sure. Thank you, Professor. You made a lot of very important questions and highlighted some of the main limitations in our study.
Sorry for too many comments from me, because this is very interesting.
No, that's great.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your thoughtful suggestions and thorough reading of the article. So thank you, Professor Rizal. So let me try to address some of them, and please let me know if I left one out. So the first is was that, okay, so the first one related to local plan knowledge, and you mentioned that the development of local plan knowledge in children depended a lot on the parents. And let me put that with another comment you mentioned, that you also mentioned that a child human capital did not only depend on nutrition, but it also depends on parental investment and the quality of schools. So I see both of those questions related, and I totally agree. I mean, it is possible, it's entirely possible, that what we're capturing in the association between local plant knowledge and nutrition might be explained by parental investment. So parents that put more resources into their kids' development, that are more worried about their development, might spend more time talking to them, might spend more time educating their kids, and might invest more additional resources in their nutrition. So I see this as one possible mechanism that can explain the relationship between the association between nutrition and human capital. I agree that's a possibility. There are other pathways as well, but that's certainly one possibility. Just let me clarify that the objective of this study is not to estimate a causal effect, but rather an association. So you're pointing at one of the possible mechanisms that could explain this association, and I agree. There might also, it's also possible that at least theoretically, that parents that are more inclined to invest in their kids would move to a village with a better school. These are, but just to give some of the local context, so Chimane villages are traditionally it's a group of related households. So it's a matrilocal society, meaning that so kids tend to live near their mothers. That's even when they get married, and so traditionally smaller villages, at least, or households are related, are kin. So that would be a little bit, that would work a little bit against the possibility of households moving to other villages with better schools. But that would not be the case in larger villages, where I mean, where there are most households and not everybody is related as family. That's a really interesting point. You mentioned that that I did not explain enough about schooling. So the schooling system, I can share with you some articles that related to the schooling system in among Chimane. These are very small schools, and usually teachers go to live to the villages, and so they spend. So, for example, a math teacher would spend 2 months in a single village, teaching every day to all the kids. So they don't have separate grades. It's all kids in the village go to the same class, and the math teacher would teach them for 2 months, and then he would move, or she would move to another village, and another teacher would come into the village, for example, to teach Spanish. And so it's a rotating system of education, for at least for the smaller villages. But the average in our sample was 1.7 years of education, so of formal education. So it's really most of the kids in our sample have very few years of formal education. Yeah, I think you mentioned this. Other forms of human capital were not included. That's also, I agree. I mean, we try to include measures of human capital that had been used in other research, and that's to enhance comparability, to make it easier to compare with other results. And so, for example, there's a study called the Young Life Study, which is the largest international longitudinal study of child growth, and that was conducted about 10 years ago in India, Ethiopia, Peru, and Vietnam, and it includes about 12,000 children. And so the type of questions, the type of human capital that we're looking at resembles that study. So it's simple questions. It's the ability to solve basic math operations, the ability to read simple sentences. We did not use the same questionnaire for the reasons I explained before, because first, because these children have a lower education, but also we had to adapt the questionnaires to make them culturally meaningful. But that is also a limitation. We restricted human capital to measures that are more readily comparable to other schools, just to get a benchmark and a sense of how do Chimane compare to other societies globally. But I agree that an interesting extension of this study would be to look at other forms of human capital that are also relevant. For example, social skills, like you mentioned. The other question was how does the study affect the livelihoods of local society? So the results from this study. So this study is part of a larger group of studies that we're looking at, and so as I mentioned in the beginning, this study group is basically trying to understand the several changes that are happening in this community, and as they integrate in the market, in a global, what's called the formal market society. And of course they have trade and they have markets and everything, but these groups are in transition towards a more formal market with the use of cash and money, and in a lot of communities they don't use cash. So the overall objective is to understand how this transition to markets affect the organization of the society. So their relationships, the way they learn, what they value, reciprocity norms, sharing, norms about private property, for example. And this specifically, we're looking at stunting and child growth as part of this larger set of studies. And how does the study affect them? Well, I think that generating knowledge about these communities is always useful. I mean, we don't always work with policymakers, but we have done. I mentioned at the end of the presentation a recent study related to the impact of conditional cash transfer programs from the government in these communities. And what we found is that the more isolated or marginalized the communities, the less likely they were to participate in government programs. And that is really raising a flag, especially for policymakers. So, and the question remains, how do you reach these communities in a way that it improves their livelihoods and their quality of life? And you don't just impose whatever your policy agenda is, but actually put them at the center of development. But it's a really interesting question, Professor, and I think you will need a larger answer. And the last one is best practices to address stunting in Indonesia. Yeah, that's the most difficult question, and I've never been to Indonesia. I would love to be there, but probably you know much more. You probably know much more than I do about best practices to address growth faltering and stunting in Indonesia. So I prefer to pass that question because you're more much knowledgeable than I am.
I thought you've been to Indonesia, so you haven't been to Indonesia then.
I think
no, but I would appreciate an invitation.
Okay. Yeah.
okay, Prof.
Thank you for your stimulating response. Then.
Okay.
That's all from me. Hope to see
Okay,
you sometimes again, either in Indonesia or in Arizona.
I think that it seems like a quote to the Prof. Eduardo and also Dr. Hulti and also Dr. Grace and Prof. Damani to make a collaboration to do the similar research perhaps. I think it will be really
good.
It will be fantastic, yes.
It will be fantastic.
Yes,
with sponsor from Punhas Hasanuddin University.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you, Prof. Rizal Damani. And then for the last responders, okay, is Dr. Grace. Dr. Grace is the part of the CMO Recfon, is organization that have a huge contribution in this issue. Dr. Grace is the representative of the organization. In fact, Dr. Grace Wange is also research in this issue that titled Social Determinant and Access to Water Sanitation Hygiene as Dominant Risk Factors of Stunting Amongst Under 5 Children in Rural Area of East Indonesia. I think it's important for this issue. Okay, Dr. Grace, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dira, for the kind introduction. Hello, hola, Prof. Uduarga. Thank you for your paper. I think it's enjoyable to read, and it's really inspiring that in the end you do a modeling, a calculation to see how the determining factors among the population are actually influencing their future, actually their human capital's numbers, and it will be very good to make the policymaker, I think, understand better about what should they do and how important is to focus on the stunting issues among this special indigenous populations. So reading your paper make me remember my own research, actually, which is Dirham somehow mentioned earlier. This is actually not our own research. I don't know whether you can already see this, but this is a collaborative research that was conducted within Universitas Indonesia. Yeah. So Recfon is an organization which is hosted basically in Indonesia by Universitas Indonesia, which is located in Java. So it's a different island with Universitas Hasanuddin, who also hosted this event tonight. So originally this study, and the study was actually conducted in Flores Island, so another island in Indonesia, which is part of the East Nusa Tenggara province. And the East Nusa Tenggara province has the highest prevalence of stunting in Indonesia. So it's become like a chronic problem. And we have this opportunity to, it's not really a cohort, but as you did, we conduct 2 cross-sectional studies within 5 years to see the condition of stunting in specific regency. So just a very small, I would say a very small part of Indonesia, I would say. So we tried to make a collaboration. I think I heard from your last conclusion that we need a multi-sectoral collaboration. So within the university, between the faculty, we make this collaboration between faculty of civil engineering, faculty of medicine, of course, faculty of dentistry, faculty of letters and social science, because they look at cultures. And there are also faculty of psychology because they look at cognitive and parenting pattern there. And also us as a center for food and nutrition. We specifically focus on nutritional status. And we had more than 1,000 respondents, child respondents, basically age 0 until 12. So we include students, also students, elementary school students, and we also have a chance to study their parents. Yeah, because we want to know their parenting method and stuff like that. So actually this study was, yeah, that's why we need more collaboration. Yeah, so that raised my first question. I was wondering what was your can you share with us your story, how you can you started your study? Is it like because someone is actually or the government actually asking you to do the analysis, or is it more like there's already a cohort there and you're really interested to study more about the specific population? Because that's what happened with us. So actually why we go to this area in Flores is because one of our professor from Faculty of Medicine, she already have this research from other funding, and it's specifically on infectious disease. So she tried to eliminate malaria there 5 years ago. But then on the same time, she also collect the nutritional status of the children and the eating pattern. So only about food and also infectious disease, because that's the two main drivers of stunting, right? And then after that, of course, the funding is stopped. And then 5 years later, we got more funding and then they need us to collaborate with the university. So we come back to, so actually the professor asked us, she invite us and also people from other faculty to come to that area and also do another cross-sectional study. And then we plan to have cohort for 3 years, but then again, funding problem. We did not have it was stopped, so we cannot. I think it's also because of the pandemic. So we cannot really do an intervention in that area. So I was wondering, maybe you can share with us, because I think you have a collaboration with the university, if I'm not mistaken, so university in US. How you actually compose your study, or how your study was funded, if you may, and then why you then interested to do the analysis and look at the human capitals. Maybe that's my first question that for your paper. I think it's also good to share with the audience what happened. Because if we have to say that Eric, we comment, oh, it's a good thing, you have to do a collaboration study, but it's not that easy. I think that's also maybe your experience. So for me, it's also interesting to know your experience in Chile. So I just give you some of the results. So this is the demographic, yeah. So majority of them is actually young families, and then they were actually in the low economic status, and the important part from the social determinant, we found that 74% of the toddlers that we analyzed is actually living in a food insecure household. So I think this is not what happened to your population, yeah. Although they were indigenous population, what I assume from your paper is they actually did not sit in the food insecure household. So that could be a major difference if we want to actually use your model, probably back in Indonesia. And because they were in food insecure, we analyzed the nutrients, and they basically lack of almost every nutrients, important nutrients, except for proteins, because actually there in the region, they eat a lot of fish. So they were sufficient in terms of consumption of fish, so they doesn't have any problem with the protein intake. So I think it will be nice if you also have this data, and then we can make a comparison, yeah, someday about the specific nutrients intake. And then about the healthy eating. So I think one of important issue is here is this in Flores, and I think also in other part of Indonesia, we have this, I think also in your country, Prof. Uduraga, so we have this, we still eat with our family. Eating with your family, sit that your mother and father is important. And actually it's still, although this population is transforming into urban population, they still have this this habit of having a family dinner together, which is from my friend from psychology, it was considered a very good culture and should be, and somehow influencing this stunting children, because they have a chance to meet their parents. They get somehow the parents, maybe during the eating, the dinner, they give somehow give a stimulation to their children, and that somehow help some of the stunted children to actually develop their, so they can reduce the stunting basically, because the children kept getting the stimulation from the parents, and it's because they still have this strong family culture of having dinner, having eating together. Yeah. So although they, of course, I think it's maybe it's also similar in your population. The mother has the main responsibility of preparing food, and they were the one who's basically take an important roles in providing food and also maintaining this culture. So woman empowerment is somehow the key. Is woman empowerment is really important in this population. Yeah, of course, I think in every population will be the same. And we also look at the children cognitive, especially the one who's already goes to elementary school. And we found that most of them is actually have an average, either for academic tests, they have an average level of academic tests. But for I think CPM is related to concentration. They have somehow have a lower concentration, and this probably also related because they were living with the food insecure household. Yeah. So because in other study that we conduct in different area in Indonesia, we found that for students with without breakfast, if they don't have their breakfast, they tend to have a lower score in math. I think that's also related somehow with this population, where because they because they live in the food insecure household, probably they don't have enough breakfast, or maybe they don't have breakfast at home before going to school. So it really influenced their score at school. But we also see that actually the parent, when parent stimulation in this population is quite average. So the conclusion from our friend in psychology is actually, although the parents already stimulate these children, the stunting children at home, they actually, the factor that influence their, why they not become stunted, because they keep getting the stimulation, is come from the extended family or extended environment, and they suspect that come from the schools. So school is actually have a very important roles. Yeah. So although maybe the parents at home, they already give us stimulation for the children during their early years, but if they go to school, they will get extra stimulation from the teachers, and this is really important for children, especially if they are stunting, how they can address, and maybe later they will not become stunted. Yeah, they're not going stunting. They were stunting, but then not stunted anymore. That was found from one of these studies. And of course, I think other factors is similar. They have problems with waters, clean water, and also land, because although the majority of them are farmers, but because the lack of water, they cannot produce food, enough food regularly. So it's different with your population, yeah, Professor Duraga, because there they don't have electricity, they can really get enough food. But here in our population is the other way around. I think food insecurity is one of the important problem why there's a high number of stunting in this area. And also they also found there's a culture, there's a potential of culture of weaving. So, and this culture is actually still it was inherited from mothers to their daughters, making clothing, yeah, with traditional weaving, and that can actually be a potential source of income, and it actually can help address the food insecurity in that area. And also there's expensive rituals that influence the why there is a the economic issues in the population, because I think in Flores there's a lot of rituals like related to your lifespan, birth, going to for the first communion, because majority of this people here are actually Catholics, so every time there is a Catholic celebration, they will have parties, and then this costs a lot of money in the rituals, and that's actually somehow influencing the economic situation of the family. So I was wondering also whether those factors is actually also captured within your population, and whether you think that socio-cultural factors and also economic factor should be included in your model. Maybe that's my last question for you, Professor Unduraga. So I think it's really interesting if we can actually adopt your model of counting the human capital to kind of validating it to our country's data. That will be the first step of collaboration, I would say. Thank you. That's all from me.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Grace. I think that's seems like a study comparison between the Eduardo and research by the Dr. Grace. But I think that's several different methods, especially for the longitudinal study that conducted by the Prof. Eduardo and his team. Okay, Prof. Eduardo, do you want to reply?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Grace, for sharing these wonderful results, and it's certainly very interesting, all the work that you're doing. So I took some notes about your comments and questions, and let me try to address them. So the first one was related to how did I begin this study, and whether it was an existing cohort, etc. So the specific research question about child stunting and human capital was something that that I was interested in, but the data, the longitudinal panel study was already occurring. So this study is led by Professor Ricardo Godoy from Brandeis University in the United States, and he and I are very good friends. And he began working in Bolivia in the 1980s as part of a World Bank intervention program, and then in the early 90s he visited the area where the study is now going on, and then he did some ethnographic work there, and he lived in that community for a while. And then it became a longitudinal study to understand changes, because he realized that these communities were integrated into the market very quickly. And he felt that it was important to document that integration, because change local culture and also health and life expectations and well-being. So this in particular was an ongoing study that I joined. I have also worked with the governments. I live in Chile now. When we did this study, I was living in the United States. I live in Chile. This is South America, just near Bolivia. And we have been working with the government, collaborating with the government to understand COVID. It's probably, well, we're all suffering from COVID now. And so we've been looking at the effectiveness of vaccines, coronavac vaccine, which I know that Indonesia has also used and actually one of the main trials was done in Indonesia. And so we've been working closely with the government, collaborating in understanding the effectiveness of the coronavirus vaccine, but we're also looking at other vaccines. We're also trying to understand the effects of non-pharmaceutical interventions to control the transmission of the virus. So sometimes, so it depends a little bit. Sometimes my experience is, especially in countries like ours, which are, have more limited resources. So oftentimes the government doesn't have a scientific branch, or I mean, the government just do whatever they can, and they have to make a lot of decisions, and there's limited evidence. So a lot of times, government look at the universities for support or to complement their decisions, and that's the case in Chile now. So I've been collaborating with the Chilean government in this. I have also done work with the government in Mexico, for example, related to dog rabies. And so it depends. Sometimes I work with government, sometimes I work only with academia, and I presume it's the same as your case, Dr. Grace. And you do whatever you have to do. So the second question, your second comment, I found really interesting. What you showed about food insecurity, and that's one major problem in malnutrition studies, and it's a major global challenge, and it's part of the global development goals. In our case, in the Amazon, food insecurity is not usually a problem. It can be, but that's not often the case, because you have people who these are a community of forager farmers. So they farm staples like rice and other staples, other local staples, starch, fruits and plants, and they also have to go with their everyday lives. I mean, it is possible because they rely on agricultural products that, I mean, if there's a drought for several years, or there's unusual rain, like extreme weather events, they might actually have some or at least a change in diet. But food insecurity is, I wouldn't say it's one of the main problems. I would say one of the main problems is the burden of infectious diseases. That's probably more challenging in our group. And then I thought what you mentioned about food eating behaviors, like family eating together, that also applies here in our region. I mean, it's an important aspect of everyday life, and in the Amazon, particularly among the Chimane, what happens is that because the kin live together, so they are related households, they are cousins, and so usually there's one pot where everybody eats from, and they pull together all the resources they have. So, for example, if you're successful at fishing one day, just come with all the fish and share with the community. If you're a good hunter and you hunt something in the forest, then you come with that meat and share it with the community. So that's a cultural expectation. And then whatever you farm is yours, but I can go to my neighbor's farm and take, bananas or the expectation is you should never be hungry, and you can take whatever you need to uh, so so I think the point you're getting at about the eating behaviors, I think is a very, very important one when you're studying malnutrition, because it determines access to food, and it determines ways of dealing with uncertainty in resources. So, like one would have in a big city, you would have some kind of insurance or a savings account. Well, in these smaller communities, you have a reciprocity norms that in a way oblige you to share and to diffuse that risk in the community. And I think that's a very important part of this kind of studies. And thank you for the thoughtful idea. I think those are the questions. Maybe I missed one.
Yes. Yes, Prof.
Yeah, I think I was asking about the feasibility of applying your human counting, because I think you make a model to count human capitals, and I was wondering whether we can actually directly use your model in a different setting, like in my setting, for example, because
Sure.
because of the difference in the variables. Yeah.
Yes. You mean the econometric model or the actual survey for local plant knowledge?
The human capital model, the corrective model.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, all these models can be used in different settings. You just have to adapt the data set and probably adapt some of the variables. But I mean, that's a nice thing about methods. You can take them from one part and apply them somewhere else, and that enhances also comparability. So, so I think it's a great idea, Dr. Grace.
Gracias.
Okay. 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 I think that's all from the Dr. Grace. And before we go to the question and answer, I will give a chance to Prof. Sukri Paluturi as the representative of the Dean of Public Health Faculty Universitas Hasanuddin. Okay, Prof. Sukri, time is yours. Okay, the committee, please unmute the Prof. Sukri. Okay.
Okay, are you hear me?
Yes, clear.
Okay, good, thanks. Good morning, Professor Eduardo Undurago, and all special responder. It is my pleasure and happy to be here in the international webinar on stunting and human capital among Indigenous community conducted by Public Health Literature Club and LK2PK, and as well as Faculty of Public Health Universitas Hasanuddin Makassar, Indonesia. I strongly agree with Professor Eduardo presentation that stunting is really related to social, economic, and culture matter. So stunting is not only about the nutrition, but all aspects can affect stunting. So we need to see from various aspects the discipline to address stunting at community level. So this is a good experience from Professor Eduardo research on child stunting. Thank you also, Professor Rizal Damanik. He's a senior lecturer, senior professor. He's working in BKKBN or National Population and Family Planning Board, and Dr. Helti from the head of Nutritional Science Department, School of Public Health, and also Dr. Grace. So I just want to say something that my faculty, Faculty of Public Health of Hasanuddin University, working some project with Ministry of Health of the Republic of Indonesia on stunting, how the local government involved and also to take a part and responsibility to address child stunting or nutrition matter in the local level. So, so the national government encourage all districts and city to take a part to solve this issue. So the role of university here is to be like a bridging to facilitate from the policy of the national level to the local level. So we encourage local level, local government to make like a policy, regulation, how can keep like a budget related to stunting, for example. And also we are working for improving immunization coverage. This is a routine immunization. And in 3 districts, city in South Sulawesi, Indonesia. And then this project is funded by the UNICEF. We also have like international collaboration. We call RISE, and then this project related to like Dr. Grace project on like sanitation, something like that, environment issue, in the city. And then we are working for some university in the global level, like in the Melbourne University and some other university in the world. I'm responsible for collaboration affairs in my faculty, so I invite Professor Eduardo. I think if any potential collaboration that we can do together from also BKKBN and then Syamel, maybe not only about the stunting issue, because in the developing countries, I think all issues are there. So, because Professor Eduardo also as a researcher at the university, so like we can work together in, for example, lecture exchange or visiting professor. Like I can invite Professor Eduardo to visit my school or university to provide a lecture, or like a speaker in the international conference, something like that. Or opposite, Professor Eduardo also can invite, my some staff or professor in my university. Or we can do like a training, joint paper and publication, or some other project that we can do together, as well as Professor Damanik from the BKKBN. I think has a project collaborate with Prof. Acha, I think, or Prof. Edi, and other colleagues in my faculty of public health, Hasanuddin University. Last, I would like to thank especially to Professor Eduardo on behalf of the Dean of School of Public Health. I would like to say thank you very much for a great contribution in this international webinar. So this participant from my faculty, they are from lecturer or researcher, and some of them also are from the doctoral program students, master students of public health from different departments. We have 7 or 8 departments in the School of Public Health. So like a department where Dr. Helki, she is from the nutritional staff or lecture, department of health administration and policy, like Eduardo. I think he can involve in this department. I read briefly the Professor Eduardo education and background. So actually he working on the social or government aspect as well related to health or well-being. And we have like a department of epidemiology, department of biostatistics and reproductive health, department of hospital management, department of environmental health, department of occupational health, department of health promotion and behavioral science. And yes, so I think we have some expert here, and then of course we can work together. So thank you very much, Professor Eduardo. Thank you very much, Professor Rizal Damani, Dr. Helgi, and Dr. Chris, and all, of course, organizing committee and public health club LK2PK. And thank you very much again. Gracias. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Thank you, Profesor Sukri. Salam Yakuza selalu dari Bogor.
Iya.
Ya, bro.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sukri. Okay, because the firstly there's a good invitation to the especially for the Prof. Eduardo, and I think Prof. Eduardo should respond the invitation. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Sukri. I mean, well, for all your thoughtful comments and also I would very much welcome any collaboration. I mean, it's really an honor, and I would love to visit or perhaps establish an exchange program where you can send the researchers and come here to work with us at the university, Universidad Católica in Chile, and perhaps we can also go. It would be great. And as you mentioned, in South America, in Chile, where I live, universities also play that role that you mentioned, that sort of support and act as a bridge between research findings and policy, and try to help and support the adaptation of national guidelines to local communities. And so I think we have a lot of shared experience that would be useful, and perhaps we can share that and learn from each other's experiences. And I always find that it's important And it's also very helpful to think about interventions, especially in public health, in somewhat different settings, but have some aspects that are different, but some share a lot of the main challenges. As you mentioned, I mean, nutrition is only one among a long list of competing priorities in our countries, you know, and that's partly it's infectious diseases, it also maternal health, it's also nutrition, it's also chronic diseases, and the transition from and probably in Indonesia, you have a lot of variation within the country. Our country is a very small country, probably the size of a small city in Indonesia. I mean, we are 19 million people, the whole country. but still, there's relevant experiences that we might share, and I appreciate your invitation. I'm very honored by it. Thank you, Professor Su.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the response. And then we
I comment.
yes, Prof Rizal.
Thank you, Professor Sukri. It's my pleasure to join this event. And BKKBN or my university, IPB, is happy to collaborate about the research that that can be collaborate among us. And actually, as BKKBN, last week, I think, BKKBN has already signed the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, to, you know, to participate. We BKKBN invite about 24 universities in South Sulawesi provinces, include the Universitas Hasanuddin, of course, to participate in our effort to reduce stunting. From, you know, at the moment, the task of BKKBN as head of organizing committee reducing stunting from 27.7 to become at the 14% for the next 2024. So yeah, I attended the meeting last month, and end of November, Four Seasons, 4 Points Hotel in Makassar, right? So thank you for this opportunity, and congratulate to the Public Health Literature Club. So salam Yakuza, Prof. Sukri.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Rizal. Okay.
That was a special message.
Okay. We will, because it's almost 9 o'clock p.m. in Western Indonesia time. Okay, we will go to the question and answers session. Okay, the first question is from Robert Tangdilian. The name institution is TM. Okay, the question is, I would like to ask to the respondent and also the speaker, is early marriage one of the cause of the stunting rate increasing drastically during the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia? Does a child with stunting status have a slightly different intelligence from a child with good nutritional status? And then the last was, what are the efforts of the government and public workers in Indonesia in reducing stunting rates in children under 5, especially indigenous people in the interior? I think the last question is especially for Prof. Damani, and 1 and 2 questions for Prof. Eduardo. Okay, Prof. Eduardo, please answer.
Yes, these are very difficult questions, which is good. I mean, it's a good sign. Seems that the people are engaging. Well, early marriage. I'm sorry to say I don't have enough information to answer that question. I mean, I don't know if what's the situation in Indonesia, and probably perhaps Dr. Grace or Professor Sukri could or Professor Healthy.
I mean, perhaps based on your experience or especially in your research, perhaps. I mean, that seems like comparison, and also. Yes.
I mean, well, the COVID pandemic has, I think, might have increased the stunting rates or malnutrition rates, mostly because some of the epidemic non-pharmaceutical interventions, such as lockdowns, for example, or restricted movement, have affected the economy, and that's not only. I mean, that's globally, I think, and I can speak of South America, and there's a big proportion of the market that is informal. So in Chile, it's about 30% of people don't have a work contract, and so they don't work, they don't get income, and that means that if you're not allowed to move, you're not allowed to go out, you're in lockdown, you cannot work, so you don't have income, and that of course affects the availability of food and nutrition. I'm not sure about the case in Indonesia, but I would presume it's pretty much same. I mean, some of the interventions have affected the economy, and the pandemic has affected the economy probably, and so people have less income and therefore more food insecurity. Does child stunting study have slightly different intelligence from a child? Well, there's a lot of variation, and there's a lot of variation between people. I mean, these studies look at an average, so you cannot make any conclusion about a specific child based on the average, and that's what's called an ecological fallacy, that you attribute characteristics of the population to specific individuals. But I mean, malnutrition affects the brain growth and development. So actually, that's one of the important aspects of addressing the problem of stunting and malnutrition, is that it might actually affect children's cognitive capacity in the long term, and that has consequences in the long term also. I don't know if schools were closed, for example, during the pandemic in Indonesia.
I
they
think
were closed.
Yes. I think it's almost happened in especially the development country, especially.
Yes. So, for example, let me put an example. So schools were closed in Chile also. All schools were closed for about a year, and schools don't only give people education, but also nutrition. So children have a breakfast in school and have lunch in school. So schools closed is really a major disaster, and also parents that are working while the kids are in school cannot work. So closing schools has a lot of externalities and imposes a big cost on families, and that has probably affected child nutrition. Okay. And I would presume that it's the same case in Indonesia. And the last question I cannot answer.
Okay, Dr. Holti, want to continue?
Okay.
Want to add something?
Okay. I would like to respond the first question. Yeah, is early marriage one of causes of stunting rate increasing drastically during COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia? Yeah, talking about the stunting is a multifactorial But we can say that if we want to prevent the stunting, we need to pay attention in the first 1,000 life of years, especially before in the pregnancy. So I think we cannot say that early marriage is the causes, but maybe we can say that early marriage is a risk factor, yeah, risk factor of the stunting increase, especially if early marriage and additional with the bad nutrition with the mother and etc. I think it will be a big risk factor. And talking about as your question, yeah, I cannot say that there is a increasing drastically, yeah, because I don't have the data, but based on the data from the Team for Acceleration of the Stunting Prevention in Indonesia, or TP2AK, prevalent stunting in Indonesia decreased in 2020. Data from Riskesdas 2018 show that stunting in Indonesia is 30.8, and in the 2020 last year, the prevalence is decreased, become 26.9%. This is of course because of the support from the national government, yeah, through the, as Prof. Damadik say that in Indonesia we have a vision that in 2024 our stunting reduction become 14%, and we can see that the prevalent stunting last year decreased around 4%. Yeah, so related to the question number one, I think we cannot say that increasing drastically, yeah, like that. And also, I think I would like to respond the previous question that before this question, yeah, from Pak Bayu, yeah, strengthening puskesmas. I think, yeah, the question, Pak MC, may I respond? The question in the chat box. I would like to share the experience from the Department of Nutrition. Yes, we agree that strengthening puskesmas is really important to prevent the stunting, increasing the stunting. Our experience in the one of district in Indonesia, Banggai district, that we strengthening in the through the posyandu praconception, if we can say, integrated health services focus on the pregnant woman. Yeah, we give the multi micronutrient to ensure that they have a health pregnancy and also have a good nutrient through the multi micronutrient supplement. So when our evaluation within this 1 year, that we focus on the 10 villages that high prevalence of stunting, and within 1 year after we intervention, so that there is no increasing of the prevalence of stunting. And we measure also to the children under 5, there is a decreasing of prevalent stunting around from 24 to 16%. So yeah, we agree that if one of the effort to prevent the stunting is strengthening the puskesmas, and also especially based on our experience, puskesmas posyandu prakonsepsi, and also of course collaboration, yeah, interdisciplinary, as Prof. Eduardo mentioned, that interdisciplinary and collaboration with the local government and other stakeholders. I think that's all. Thank you. You're still mute.
Okay. Prof Rizal. Enggak kedengaran. Prof Rizal, could you please? Oh, I think Prof Rizal. Okay. Okay. I will go to the next question. This is the last question. I'm really sorry for all of you that question that I could respond, because it's almost 9:30 and in the eastern of Indonesia it is 10 o'clock. Okay, the question is from Juniani Stikim Ima. Good morning, Dr. Eduardo, and good evening, Indonesia. Let me asking about stunting in the COVID-19 on Bolivian and Amazonian. So how many cases stunting human capital among indigenous communities, sir? Is that a half of or more than that? Is like 80% cases every year? Thank you. Please, Prof. Eduardo. I think the question is about the prevalence. Is that any similar year by year, or is there any increasing in the year by year, or I mean, or
so
perhaps?
So if I'm interpreting the question correctly, it's the question relates to knowing whether the COVID pandemic has increased stunting in the Bolivian Amazon or not. And unfortunately, I do not have the data to answer that question properly, because a lot of these indigenous groups are isolated. We have not visited them just to avoid bringing COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, to the community. And so we stopped, when the pandemic began, we stopped visiting the community. And we might resume next year, because I know the Bolivian government is providing a vaccination now. But I'm just to avoid being the virus vectors. But as I mentioned before, I think the COVID pandemic has affected, because it has affected the economy and economic activity and income of most households. I would presume that stunting has increased in Bolivia as a whole, as a country, but perhaps not so much in the Bolivian communities, because they are relatively autarkic. So they depend on whatever they are farming locally and whatever they're gathering from the forest. So the changes in the economy, in the market, do not affect them too much. So my guess is that the stunting rates are probably around the same in those communities, but have probably increased in the country as a whole.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, Prof, for the response. And I think that is such our homework, especially for Indonesia to maintain the data, especially for the stunting in the rural area or the indigenous people. I think, yeah, I think that's all. That's really good inputs to us, especially in Indonesia. Okay, because it's 9:15 p.m. in Western Indonesia. So I beg all of your pardons for the mistakes from me during the events, and also our limitation. And I'm really sorry that I cannot respond all of your question. But perhaps the audience who have still the question could contact Prof. Eduardo. Prof. Eduardo, would you mind to share your social media and email so the audience can contact you regarding to your research?
My email in the chat, and then my have social media, I only use because the work.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. As for your information that Professor Eduardo is really active in the Twitter, especially for the information from the Chile. I think it's really be really good communication.
Fortunately, it's in Spanish, but
what is it?
probably translate.
Yes. I think the Twitter has the translation mode, so we can translate to the English. Yes, but most of the Twitter of the Prof. Eduardo is in Spanish. I mean, okay. I think that's all for me. And thank you for the special responder and the Prof. Eduardo, and also for the committee to give me a chance. And the next, then I will give the show to the presenter, Ms. Puji. Thank you. Ms. Puji.
Baik, thank you Dr. Dirham for facilitating our webinar impressively. I would like to thank the presenter and the responder for the willingness to contribute to this webinar. We are very grateful to have you here. Now we are create the announcement about 2 active participants. Please share screen, committee. Congratulations to Bayu Prabu Pangestu Ayatullah dan Robert Tangdilian. Okay. Thank you everyone for your enthusiasm and for joining this event till the end. See you at our next webinar. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Last one.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Take a photo.
Oke, baik. Boleh dibantu panitia untuk foto bersama. Saya ini kan ya. Saya bantu. Ini ada 9 slide.
There's 9 slide.
9 slide. Oke, kita mulai slide pertama. 1. Oke, mana nih?
Slide keberapa ya?
10. Keep smiling aja, Prof.
Jelas ini kita slide mana ini?
Keep smiling until the end.
We'll take a picture, so please smile.
Terima kasih minumnya.
You're welcome.
Nanti kalau ke Makassar minum saraba saya.
Oh iya, siap Prof. Siap menemani.
Saraba di BNI atau di mana tuh? Yang top.
Ikan bakar, Prof.
Temannya pisang epe, Prof. Epe.
Pisang epe ya.
Oke.
Itu Prof Puji sedang di Magelang rupanya. Aduh,
Prof Eduardo perhaps want to taste the local culinary from Makassar.
Would love to.
Yeah, so that's why we need to invite Professor Eduardo to come to Indonesia.
Este delicioso, Prof.